welcome back to A Safe Place. If you're new here, my name is Mariah, and I am so glad that you are here. We are currently going through the book of Genesis, and today we will be in chapters 12 and then 13. The way that things work here is we typically go chapter by chapter, but because we're doing the entirety of Genesis during the Lenten season, we will be doing 2 chapters a day. So we'll start out in 12, and then there'll be a break in case you want to pause and watch chapter 13 later on. So let's see what is happening in chapter 12. Canaan suffers a severe drought and famine. Abram temporarily relocates to Egypt, but his fear of being killed causes him to ask Sarai to say she was his sister and not his wife. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. For the famine was severe in the land. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai his wife, "I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake." When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house, and for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here's your wife, take her and go." And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Can you imagine your spouse looking at a group of people and being like, "Oh, she's just my sister. He's just my brother." What? What? Men, if this does not tell you to take claim of your wife when you're in public, I don't know what will. And not even just wife, but like when you're courting someone, I want to say that too. When you're courting someone, I know that you're dating and you guys should like probably talk about boundaries and that kind of thing anyway, but when you are in public, if you are not willing to claim them as someone you are pursuing, maybe they are not the person you were supposed to be pursuing. And also on that same note, maybe you're not pursuing them at all. Just Abram believed only drastic action would save his family and chose to go to Egypt until the famine in Canaan ended. However, Abram gave in to fear and asked his wife to participate in a half-truth. Sarai was his father's daughter, but not his mother's. She was both his wife and half-sister. Abram's uncharacteristic deception left both Sarai and the Egyptians open to sin, and taught his family that deceit is acceptable. His actions also demonstrated a lack of trust in God to protect him. God himself was a defense for Sarai in the situation. He kept her safe. It was only God's grace that caused this episode to end well. Since childhood, we've all been told that honesty is the best policy. If you're a parent, you teach and expect honesty in your children. But like Abram, we all have moments when fear, selfishness, or convenience tempts us to be less than completely honest. A half-truth might technically be correct, but if the objective is to mislead someone, then you're practicing deception. In what situation do you maybe need to relinquish control and trust God for the outcome? Has your family learned to trust or to doubt God by your example? Remember, a half-truth is a whole lie. That feels kind of harsh, but it's real. And not just because like a little white lie is going to be harmful in the moment, but because it will probably lead to bigger sin, right? If you give an inch, it'll take a mile. If you give the devil an inch, he'll take a mile. So don't give him anything. Anywho, I am preaching to myself. Okay. Let's see what's happening in chapter 13. Abram begins the journey back to Bethel as soon as the famine ends, and recurring strife between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot make a parting of ways necessary. It's an interesting way to word that. All right. Okay. So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into Negeb. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he journeyed on from the Negeb as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Abram had grown very rich in Egypt, and now the large herds of Abram and Lot were too much for that area of Canaan. Abram generously and unselfishly gave his younger kinsman first choice of the land, showing his desire for restoring the strained relationship. Lot saw the fertile area around Sodom and selected what seemed the best soil without taking into account the wickedness of the people. Abram continued traveling to Hebron, again building an altar of worship where God reaffirmed his covenant. Often, loving your neighbor and family requires sacrifice. In fact, we're often more generous with acquaintances than with the people we live with. With whom in your family do you have a strained relationship? What opportunity will you have this week to put their needs before your own? When you do, you're fulfilling the second most important commandment in Scripture. Will you, like Abram, trust God enough to give up what seems to be the best? Keeping the peace may require some sacrifice on your part, but your actions will honor God before your entire family. That part where it says Lot saw the fertile area around Sodom and selected what seemed the best soil without taking into account the wickedness of the people. And it's referencing verse 13. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. I guess it's assuming that Lot kind of knew that at that point. But what that made me think of is how often do we pick classes or jobs or friend groups without, one, taking the Lord into consideration, but then also taking in consideration the people that are there. I think some people would push back to that and say, well, Jesus sat with sinners, and he absolutely did. And I'm not at all saying that we're not called to do that. But sometimes you have to use discernment in certain situations. And if you are placing yourself somewhere where you're not mature enough in the spirit to avoid the temptation of being around that sin, then it's not really you sitting with sinners anymore. It's not really you setting an example. It's pushing back on the foundation of your relationship with the Lord, right? I used to use this phrase a lot before really coming to the Lord. And one of my best friends just reminded me of it a couple months ago. But I used to say, not everyone is supposed to be at your table. That doesn't mean that you're not in the same cafeteria. It's just keeping in mind that our closest 5 people to us typically reflect who we are. And while I hope that number 1 is always Jesus, we do have to be mindful of who the other 4 are. If you notice Jesus's life, he spends so much time with the disciples, people recognizing him for the truth that he is. So if your closest 5 people aren't building you up, aren't correcting you in love when you're wrong, and aren't following Jesus, that's just something to consider. And I cannot recommend getting in community enough. We are called as Christians to be in community. It is what helps us fight the good fight. And so my prayer for you this week is to love on those people around you that help you to be who you are meant to be in Christ. I hope you have the absolute most blessed day, and I will see you back here again tomorrow for chapters 14 and 15. Bye.